So this is week 2 of this video series, and I really got to think of a name for it. Maybe the Rob Palin Show. Who wouldn't want to see that? Let us know your suggestions in the comments below. But let's get right into this and talk about a broken nose and some other stuff. The first story of the day comes from UFC Fight Night Montevideo, and I know what you're thinking, don't leave. It wasn't a great card, I know, but I'm going to get onto the good stuff and then swiftly move on, so just stay put. Despite a world title fight headline on the card, the big story of the night was related to a big broken nose. And we'll get there shortly, but first a few words on the main event. Valentina Shevchenko's flyweight title was up for grabs for Liz Carmouche, and leading in, there wasn't a whole lot of anticipation that the American could upset the current champion. As expected, Shevchenko walked through Carmouche. And when I say walk, I do mean walk. It was an amble, really. Uneventful is probably the right word to use. Pundits going in pulled out that classic MMA trope of striker versus wrestler. The story of the fight was, if Carmouche could get some takedowns, that would be her path to victory. And while that analysis does work in some cases, especially where you have a real specialist competing, that was never really the story here. I think Valentina has proven that she's no one-trick pony. A singular-minded approach was never going to work here, and Carmouche found that out pretty quickly, and she likely knew it beforehand. A good friend of mine, Dorman, made this point before, and I'm definitely paraphrasing, but as a striker, your first line of defense in relation to takedowns is your footwork. If you're consistently in a position where takedowns become low percentage techniques, you've made a great start. Similarly, it works in reverse. If a fighter can consistently put themselves in a position where a takedown becomes possible, they've made a great start. That's the reason why non-wrestler George St. Pierre was such an effective takedown artist in mixed martial arts. Footwork and masking strikes were the key. And that's sort of what happened here. Carmouche never really was in a position to get takedowns, and when she did, she was off balance, and even she was taken down. Oh, and check out Brenda's channel. I'll put the link in the description below. In any case, it was easy work for Shevchenko. Ironically, her best moments were when she was on top in grappling scenarios. On the feet, she was resigned to a counterpuncher, and that's pretty much her game, but Carmouche took the same approach, which made the fight, as I said, pretty uneventful. So what's next for Valentina? Well, it's pretty difficult to foresee any flyweights next in line really challenging her in any meaningful way, let alone dethrone her. And I know everybody's saying this right now, but it's true. A rematch with Amanda Nunes is probably the most interesting fight for Valentina right now. But Valentina made it pretty clear in her post-fight press conference that that's not something she's really interested in pursuing right now. So hey, we'll see what happens. The co-main event between Platinum Mike Perry and Vicente Luque was really what everybody was talking about after the event, and for good reason. It was a fun fight, as expected, but it was a flying knee in the closing moments that broke news. But yeah, within the last minute of the fight, which was fairly close, Luque landed a flying knee which literally crushed Mike Perry's nose. And man, Perry, by the way, he is one tough fucking bastard. He barely budged when it landed and immediately pursued a takedown. The final moments ended when Perry was stuck in a guillotine choke, nose deformed with blood pouring down Luque's body as Perry used it like a target to get a few more licks in. Luque in the end was awarded a split decision victory, and for me, I was fine with the result, but let me know in the comments below if you thought Perry took it. As for Perry's nose, it's obvious it needed repair, and according to his wife, he underwent successful surgery after the fight. Later, his manager said he was out of surgery early Sunday morning and that the procedure only lasted an hour. Doctors, man, they're absolute lifesavers, and I know they're literally lifesavers, that's what they do, but you know what I mean. And I know Perry certainly has that bad boy type reputation, but to be honest, you have to give him a lot of credit for how he's dealt with everything post-fight. He's been super respectful, and to be honest, he's been pretty fucking charming in his own way. He took to Instagram to extend an invitation to Luque to train together once he's healed up. He said, "Fight of the night, it takes two. Thanks for the bonus. You didn't have to do that to my face like that though. Of course with this chin. Should have had my guard up like you. KO or not, one significant strike can do the job. When I'm healed, we'll train so you can beat these wrestlers. Congrats." Luque responded saying he'd love to train with him and called him the toughest man he's ever fought. And, based on that nose and him not backing down, I think it's probably true. Wrestler Jordan Burroughs also commented on the fight, mentioning that this is one of the reasons why he doesn't really want to take up MMA. He said, "Every time I'm tempted to get in the octagon, I see something like this and I'm like, nah, I'm good." And we know what's next for Perry. It's not getting punched in the face for a while. Specifically, it's 6 months of no contact according to reports. But what's next for Luque? He called out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and I like that fight. Luque is certainly deserving of a higher ranked fighter, and unlike many others in his position, Wonderboy has never really shied away from competing against guys ranked below him, admittedly to his detriment at times. times. And a fight that makes sense to me from a purely matchmaking point of view was Robbie Lawler. He's certainly in the third act of his career and Luque is just on the come up. But man, Luque might be the dark horse at welterweight. His only loss in the last 4 years being to Leon Edwards. And that loss has aged very well. On a side note, here's a fun fact. Did you know that Luque beat Thiago Santos? You know, the Thiago Santos who just went 5 rounds with John Jones? Mad, right? The other real standout from the card was Volkan Ozdemir's knockout over Ilir Latifi. That was nice. And for anyone who watched last week's video, you might have noticed I went 3 for 3, so, you know, just saying, bro. In other news, and in my opinion more interesting news, it's UFC 241 Fight Week. And looking at the main card, it's probably the best main card the UFC have put on for a pay-per-view this year. The trio of fights built on the top are compelling in their own ways. The 2 other fights, from a pay-per-view perspective, aren't great, but they both have something that makes me interested in them. But that said, I'm not going to get into those today. So let's start with that main event. It's a rematch from almost a year ago. For the first bout, Daniel Cormier moved back up to heavyweight as the reigning light heavyweight champion to compete for Stipe Miocic's heavyweight title. As we all know, I'm sure, Cormier finished Stipe by knockout in the first round, and ever since, Stipe has been campaigning for a rematch. And it looked like it wasn't going to happen for him. Former heavyweight champ and WWE star Brock Lesnar was supposed to fight Cormier for the title, but a deal between the UFC and Lesnar reportedly fell through. Cormier, in the meantime, took a short notice fight to successfully defend his title against Derek Lewis, which is something that seemed to really piss off Stone Cold Stipe Miocic. He even said he wouldn't have done the same for a rematch with Stipe because he'd need more time to prepare and be healthy. And you know, you don't always get that type of honesty in this sport, so you know, bravo, sir. After all that, it's actually happening, and despite their first one ending by early knockout, it's still super intriguing. And Miocic had his moments early on, especially when he managed to use his footwork to trap Cormier with his back to the cage. And not in a clinch position, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I mean when he was fighting in the open while Cormier's back was stuck behind the cage, almost brushing up the cage. The problem here for me is that Stipe, who has a wrestling background himself, really does like to mix up and get into clinch positions. He likes to fight in close quarters, even though sometimes it might be best served for him to fight at range. And that's not to say that Cormier didn't have any success at range either, because he actually did. His hand speed at heavyweight is really deceiving. It's really, really fast. And although he gives up plenty of reach to his opponents, he does find a way to close distance and use that snappy jab and right hand. And he throws them in combination too. One thing I thought he really done well against Stipe was use his kicks, especially that lead kick to the body and even the leg kicks. Oh, and his eye pokes were on point too. Must have been hanging out with his mate John Jones, what? But the eye pokes were absolutely a factor. I mean, have you ever got poked in the eye? It fucking sucks. I got some dust stuck in my eye one time and I thought that was it. I thought that was it for me. I thought I was blind. I'm just blind now. Just because they're fighters, it doesn't mean they have immunity to all pain and damage. A kick in the dick is a kick in the dick, and a poke in the eye is a poke in the eye. It is what it is. But the question is, was the eye poke the deciding factor in the outcome? And I don't know. Cormier was fighting pretty damn well, and if I were to make an in-play bet before the eye poke, I probably would have bet Cormier. Miocic, like Cormier said he would before the fight, exited the clinch with his hands virtually in his pockets and got cracked. And here's proof that Cormier actually said that.
There are some things that he does.
Stipe's not watching.
No, there are some things that he does, especially when you get out of clinch positions where his hands are pretty low and that chin is way up in the air. He's got a big old face, and I'm going to try to crack him upside his head.
Anyway, that's all in the past, so who wins this Saturday? I'm taking Cormier again. If I was rooting for Stipe, I'd like to see him cut Cormier off like he did early on and corral him up against the cage, but then work from range from there. Not necessarily clinch in that position. I thought he'd done a good job in the first fight in that position. For DC, it's a matter of doing the same thing again. And I know Stipe is going to make improvements and try plug some of them holes that he has in his game. But I think if Cormier can still force clinch positions, punch in the range with his superior hand speed, and mix it up with his kicks, especially that kick to the body. And if it goes later, mix in some takedowns and win rounds, I think DC can get it done. So I'm going DC. In the co-main event, Nate Diaz returns to fight Anthony Pettis. And man, I think this is a highly consequential fight for the UFC as a whole, especially if Diaz wins. But I'm not going to unravel that thread too far right now. Expect a Nate Diaz specific video on the channel during the week. I have some thoughts I want to share. But this is a fun fight, man, simply just for the contest. It's an excellent scrap, even if you remove the narrative, the return, the ramifications of it all, and the potential resurgence for Anthony Pettis, who, don't forget, is coming off a knockout win over Stephen Thompson. And it's funny to think that when Pettis was on top of the world, posing for the Wheaties box as world champion, Diaz was floundering. Now Diaz, despite not fighting in 3 years, is arguably one of the UFC's biggest superstars, and Pettis is a little bit of an afterthought. That could change for him with a win though. A wonder boy and then Diaz scalp would do wonders for his career. In terms of how the fight plays out, well, I'm a bit torn on that. I don't think the time off affects Diaz. If anything, it was probably a good thing. He's never really out of shape, and I think parts of his style match up really well with Pettis. I mean, guys who have put high paces on Pettis have generally found success. But Diaz's boxing-centric style could be a problem in my opinion. We've seen him pieced up a little bit before by good kickboxers, and Pettis is certainly one of them, maybe one of the better ones in the UFC. I mean, when Conor and Diaz fought the second time, Conor did take a more kickboxing approach. But of course, you know, it's not the rule. Diaz has done well against kickboxers like Cerrone, so... you know. But with all that said, I'm gonna go Diaz. And I do admit there's a little bit of bias to that pick, and it's not because I'm a Diaz fanboy or anything like that, but it's because I'm very interested to see what would happen if Diaz won. I think it'd be amazing theatre. It would be a journey that I kind of want to go on. Up next, a clash of titans. It's Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. Actually, 1 second. I'm a little bit thirsty. Just give me 1 second. I'll be back. Don't move. Don't move. What? This fight is a fight that the UFC have been trying to put together for almost a year, because of course they have. It'll be like watching a pro wrestling match from the 80s with these lads, because they're absolutely jacked lads. But how will it go? I'm going to take Costa. It is a bit risky though. He hasn't fought in over a year and he's kind of untested. But Romero has been out for over a year himself, so there are questions on how both guys will respond. But we have seen Romero look fine after taking a year out between the Jacare and Weidman wins. Costa showed some deficiencies in his striking against Uriah Hall last time out, but Hall is a really talented striker, regardless of his UFC success to date. But I just feel like Costa will put on a ton of pressure early on Romero, and Romero doesn't really like that. He likes to fight in bursts of aggression. He doesn't like a consistent, constant pace, similar to the likes of Tyron Woodley, so I think he might have some trouble keeping up. We haven't seen a ton of Costa off his back, and Romero of course is an amazing wrestler. He just doesn't go to it that much, but I'll be very interested to see how Costa could do if he does end up on his back. And be sure to leave your picks in the comments below. And here is everything else you should know and see this week. See this bare knuckle FC knockout? Know that Aloy Quinta versus Dan Hooker has been verbally agreed for UFC 243 on October 5th in Melbourne, Australia. Know that Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz 2 has been set for December 7th in Saudi Arabia. And people, rightfully so, aren't happy. It actually reminds me of this moment.
The 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
Know that Patricky Pitbull will be reportedly competing in the Rising Lightweight Grand Prix in October. He'll be on loan from Bellator and it will be, quote, under Pride rule style. Pride never die. Know that Jorge Masvidal says that he vows to wipe the floor with Leon Edwards, but says the fight happens on his terms. And I'm not really sure what his terms mean, but if Colby Covington is going to get the next title fight, and it looks like he will, I do like the fight. I mean, on one hand, you'd like to see Jorge wait for a title fight because he's absolutely red hot, but sitting out probably isn't the best idea. Know that Daniel Cormier says it's only big fights for me, Stipe Miocic, and if I fight again, it'll be John Jones. It won't be anybody else. I've seen a comment about Francis Ngannou and how that would be a big fight for Daniel Cormier, and maybe. And that's it. We're done. And if you enjoyed this video and you're not subscribed to the channel already, hit that subscribe button and, you know, give us a like as well, because that helps us out. And if you are a subscriber, make sure you hit the bell so you can get these notifications, because a lot of people aren't getting these notifications. Thanks for watching. Cheers.
So apparently if you press this button somewhere here, it subscribes and you get all the notifications for the show. So hit that button there.
You have to click the bell though to get the notifications
here.
down the bottom.
Make sure you hit that, and they get the ringer things because Rob didn't know. So it's the button there. There.
It's somewhere roughly around that area.